sure that things were going well, uh, uh, the how do you say? I would say that the parents would say, Reverend, uh, this boy has to be dragged out of his bed in the morning to go to school during the regular school year, but he gets me up to come to Freedom School. And that, of course, stuck in my mind because it was evident that there was something going on in the Freedom School that so ignited the interest of young boys that they would beat their parents up getting ready to come to this place. And then I would say, over time, we understood, and we had testimony from teachers in schools, that our kids were retaining more knowledge from the prior year of school than most kids. And that became a big point of advocacy for Freedom School. Foundations like that idea of learning retention. So in addition to promoting, cultivating an interest in reading, community service, this matter of knowledge retention from one academic year to another is a prominent feature of the Freedom School. And I would say the parent component is another one. We had weekly meetings of parents, and it was very interesting. We raised the money, and this was a dictate from CDF. Freedom Schools did not cost participants money, so we had to raise all the money and finance the thing. And we found that parents saw this as an opportunity to drop their kids off. They weren't really drawn to the curriculum, they were drawn to the convenience of essentially free childcare. So when we brought the parents together, that was an interesting discovery. And of course, this helped me to understand the needs of parents because in effect, Freedom School is taking up the basics of the historically oppressed African community at the root. So much is neglected in the way of basic, what I would say, education, that even parents need tremendous nurturing and tremendous help in this regard. So this is just a little word about our experience. We did many, many, many things, including, for example, a giant mural led by Newark's own Jerry Gant, who, of course, unfortunately, has passed away. So we got the kids involved in painting a mural on the outside wall of a building. And we volunteered. I think some Newarkers will remember the tragic slaying of the children in the schoolyard that summer. And so our kids responded to that by visiting with their parents and this kind of thing. So I'll stop there. And in the course of our time together, if you have questions, I'd be glad to respond.
Reverend Howard, that was wonderful. I know there will be questions, but before we go to those, Monica, I'm just going to ask you to talk about your experience, and you can start with YMS, but go any place you want. But I know people want to know the impact that it had on you, right? What difference did that make for your current life? Beyond that, anything you'd like to talk about is fine.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Payne. So I'll start by saying that, or reiterating from the video earlier, that the function of a Freedom School is to liberate the minds of young people, which is what YMS has done for me and a lot of other Newark natives. And it starts by having a summer curriculum with an intention to give students from a variety of different types of schools in Newark a historical analysis and knowledge of self, which is really important. And then it fosters a connection to the broader community of Newark and instills a sense of pride in that community and in our schools. But it exposes students to the educational disparities and offers the opportunity to learn about systemic inequalities that are rampant in the Newark community and communities like ours, in order to get students to understand to a degree how we got here. Before YMS, like most students, when I was in high school, I knew poverty existed, but I didn't understand why or really understand the historical disinvestment in our communities and the compounding effects of intergenerational poverty. But the magic of programs like YMS, which normally isn't spoken about in a way where we talk about freedom schools, but really has a lot of those elements. This program doesn't just stop with sharing that knowledge, right? You don't learn to resent your community because of these systemic issues. It helps you understand, like I said earlier, why it has happened, how it has happened, and then it empowers students to be creative about being an active part of solving our own problems. So in the YMS program specifically, and programs like it, I would say there's an ongoing call to action when you join the program. So YMS teaches you a skill, the art and science of digital media, and the potential power it has, which young people harness to advocate for themselves, which makes this a very special program, right? It uses that power of the media. So students develop sort of a comfortability with speech writing, developing their own voice, and are encouraged to speak up at community meetings, school board meetings, community events, local government meetings, like council meetings. And we've had students in YMS give testimony and record some of that at Senate hearings and the local government meetings or community meetings mentioned earlier. We've had students conduct a youth listening tour. They designed and volunteered in their own college success centers, which ALI still has today. And the program and students continue to produce viral media videos. And I was very excited as a young person to learn some of these skills, but then to also help bring through younger students after I've graduated and gone to college, and to help them do even more than we did when we were in the program. So many graduates of the program often leave with support in the college application process, whether before it was just Kaleena, Mr. Singleton, Mr. Williams, and Candy Berryman, who helped us apply to college, helped us figure out the scholarship applications and such. But now they have a systemic way where any student can come in and get help from a college student or volunteer, or even a peer, one of their peers in high school for that process. And that's really important because a lot of students like myself wouldn't have had that support otherwise. So tons of our graduates have become teachers. They work in youth development, public service, or other fields like philanthropy, where I work, rooted in serving the community. Many of the graduates also go on to lead demonstrations because they learn about their own history. They learn about what advocacy is. They learn how to use the media as a tool for that advocacy. And then sometimes they do things like start nonprofit organizations. Jennifer Made, who's on this call, she has started tons of nonprofits and even works with people in the Newark community, helping them start their own organizations from a legal perspective. In addition to her work running the YMS program now. When I was in college, I started a mentoring program that in many ways was inspired by YMS. And that program is called Schooled. And the motto is basically having college students from where I went, Seton Hall, and some of the local universities, they meet, they have their own student organization on campus, but then they go to schools like Central High and at one point West Side High, where the college students would mentor the high school students and help them make it to where they made it to college or wherever it is that whatever types of secondary or post-education that students were interested in. Whew, that's a mouthful. I don't know if you want me to go into more about how it's prepared me for the professional world of philanthropy, but I'm happy to do that.
Please do.
Awesome. So YMS has helped me obviously develop my own voice and get comfortable advocating for myself, both in academic and professional spaces. So because I work in a predominantly white field, right, that uses the benefits of capitalism to fund nonprofits and research institutions, I've had to create and I've had to create my own liberation in that space and challenge some of the white saviorism that's rampant in philanthropy, had to have hard conversations about white supremacy norms in my field. And because of my experience in YMS and through my own development over the years, it's really helped me to create my own space in this field and to challenge the institutions that I work for or come into contact with through my work to ultimately become a more equitable institution, do philanthropy right, so to speak, and then ultimately get philanthropy as a field on that track. And that's a conversation that's happening today. But when I worked at, I've been at Robert Wood Johnson for about 3 years, and I was at Victoria Foundation for about 2.5 years. Like, these conversations didn't just start, but they are now more widespread, especially after the national kind of conversation around racial equity has come to the forefront.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Impressive.
What I like about, oh, sorry, would you say that, Dr. Reverend Howard?
No, Bill Howard, please.
Okay.
No, I was just saying impressive. And I second Junius's comment. I mean, I wasn't a YMS instructor, but my chest is sticking out, right?
I love it.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you. And YMS, if it wasn't for YMS and Abbott leadership, I wouldn't have even known what philanthropy was to even like have these conversations today, right? But it was my experience as a student, being a part of the program and understanding what was happening around me. And then the experience of leading that program as a young professional. This was my first job out of college. Actually, I started the job my senior year in college. And over the years, Kaleena and Mr. Williams kept me engaged. And when when they taught me enough skills to write grants, that's when I learned about what foundations did and what philanthropy was. And that gave me the experience in order to enter the field and make a meaningful difference. So thank you. Thank you to YMS. Thank you to Mr. Williams, Kaleena.
And thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one follow-up question to each of you. Then Junius, I want you to say something about what Monica, since she called your name out, we might as well continue with that. And then we'll turn it back to the audience. But Dr. Howard, can you say anything about the impact that you've seen this program have on the servant leaders, the young people, I think usually college students who are recruited to do the teaching in CDF Freedom Schools?
In the current period, that is to say, when I was at Bethany and Freedom School was current for me, I remained in pretty close touch with particularly the servant leaders. But I'll say that the Freedom School went on so long that we actually had servant leaders who were scholars in the Freedom School initially. The other thing is, let me say that our servant leaders came from colleges around the country, but they were all from Metro Newark. And, they were self-starters before we met them, which is in part why we chose them. And they followed a trajectory that you would expect, young people on the move. A young woman right now who was a servant leader quite some time ago, who went off to obtain a master's degree and to serve in another capacity, is now a key administrator of the Freedom School at Bethany today. So that would be, I guess, the brief answer to your question.
That's fine. And in my experience, and I believe it's true for CDF nationally, they have servant leaders come back summer after summer, the same people, because they themselves are learning so much. What they are teaching, they did themselves not know before they became servant leaders.
Well, let me just say in that regard, Charles, very briefly, servant leaders who began with us initially, every one of them returned until they graduated college. That was the level of dedication. Now we didn't pay sub minimum wage either, so that was good. But the point is, they enjoyed it. They were dedicated to it. And we failed to mention that another program we operated at Bethany provided mentorship and support for young men coming out of youth prisons. And we eventually had people from that program as servant leaders. And of course, that's a story in itself. When you invest confidence in people who have had some failures in their life, how they blossom and how they become very civic minded and live very productive lives.
That's very important. Monica, I'm going to ask you, actually, I think we'll switch to Kaleena. Kaleena, you had a question, I believe, that you'd like both of them to respond to.
Yeah, just, for us to be able to understand the ingredients of Freedom School. So if each of you could just give us a couple of things that have to be present in order for it to be a Freedom School, so that we can just really conceptualize what this means. So just Dr. Howard and Monica, what are just a couple of things that must be present for something to be considered a Freedom School?
After you, Monica.
All righty. So I would say, number one, teaching our children our own history that's not often taught in schools, unless you have an especially caring teacher, like many of the teachers and former principals on this call right now. That's that knowledge of self that becomes really important. That's one. I think connecting students to the broader community, as mentioned in the video from earlier during this Zoom call, I think that's a transformative aspect of what Freedom Schools do, because it opens up the hearts and minds of students. And like I said, it builds that connection to the community, and without having resent for the negative things that go on, but being optimistic about the positive things that are possible. And then third, or lastly, I would say connecting students to become agents of change, or inspiring students to become agents of change and empowering them to be a part of their own solutions. I think those are the three things for me, but I'm sure there's many other ingredients.
Those are great. Dr. Howard?
Somebody, I think it was in the video, said that people would get up early in the morning and they would go to the Freedom School not expecting that they would be dancing to Frankie Beverly, something of that sort. And the thing that parents wanted to be a part of, aside from the field trips that we would take kids on, the parents would bring their kids, but they would stick around for Harambe, Monica, they loved the singing because, you know, there was a kind of freedom of the spirit in this singing and in this collective experience of harmony. And and then it became cool to read. You know, initially that was not necessarily the thought, but by the end of the summer, you saw kids who might have been a little less enthusiastic about reading, understanding that it was cool to read. You know, Benjamin Mays, Morehouse College, is famous to have said, if you want to hide something from folk, you put it in books. But that's not true of the Freedom School kids, because reading became cool. The other thing is that the national dimension of this thing, when the servant leaders would go to Tennessee, they would meet their peers from all over the country, and they would recognize that they were a part of a national movement. And they brought that spirit back into the local context and imparted that to the kids. They would talk about their experience at Haley Farm. So the little kids knew that somewhere in Kansas City, there was somebody like him or her going through a similar experience. And then I would say connecting to the community. Tori and Tanisha were very much community-oriented young people, the leaders. And our kids were always conscious of how what they were doing was somehow going to be connected to where they lived in the neighborhood.
And Kaleena didn't ask me, but I'm going to give my opinion anyway. In terms of connecting to the community, my experience in Chicago, we had a group of parents that during the school year, we could not beat them to show up at the school. No matter what we did, they wouldn't come. Freedom School, they're there all the time, right?
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
part of that goes back to what Reverend Howard was saying about music. Not about music, but about an expressive culture that makes you feel affirmed, that resonates for you. And the fact that when parents came into the Freedom School, there was usually this kind of singing or dancing going on that just felt like home to them. Plus the fact that they were treated by the young servant leaders with just the utmost respect, right? I mean, that is a part of their training, and it has an enormous impact.
And called scholars, right?
They call them scholars.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, that I want to say, and again, I can't speak for SNCC, but I want to know, if SNCC of the 1960s, if they could be here to hear that, when they heard Monica say, I can advocate for myself and others, I think they would say, that's it. If all you can get out of kids, I can advocate for myself and others, right? Then that's a Freedom School. Now, how you got there, it could be this, that way, or that, and all of your pathways are really crucial, right? But that sense that where you want to end up with is young people who can stand up, as Charlie Cobb said in the original perspective, and ask real questions, right? Advocate for themselves and others.
Well, Charles, another thing that was mentioned, I think in the video, which I observed, is that in every new group, and I know that Kaleena is trying to get in here, but with every new group of Freedom School scholars, there were always a handful of kids who stood around the wall the first 3 or 4 days. They were shy. They didn't know where they fit in, you know? And then in the video, someone said, it was interesting to see that over time, these wall standers, these shy people, were aggressively seeking to lead Harambe. And what does that mean? That means you've got to get up there in the middle of the circle and get everybody gathered there, excited about the day. And that took a lot of courage. And you would see the transformation in young people's personalities. And of course, the parents would notice this. They would say, I can't get this boy to say 3 or 4 words. Now you got him talking. So to me, that's another dimension of helping young people discover their own voice and be able to speak up for themselves, as Monica has said.
Kaleena?
Yeah, just wanted to quickly add, I think, I don't remember if Reverend Howard or Dr. Payne said it earlier, that even the ALI classes are kind of like a freedom school for adults. And so I think one of the things that the culture that Mr. Williams started with ALI, that is just like, we'll teach you the skill, but if you don't understand these 2 things, you can't even work for us. And that's creating sense of belonging and sense of power. So for me, freedom school spaces, there has to be a sense of belonging, and that comes from the music, that comes from the culture, that comes from the things that you do at 6 in the morning. It makes young people and parents feel like they belong to something, like they are welcome. In YMS, students could have disabilities, stutter, any kind of challenge that might make a child feel ostracized in a regular public school. In our spaces, there is no laughing at difference. There is no feeling like you're awkward. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, you belong. And when you come into the ALI class, when you come into YMS or even our College Success Center, there's a feeling of belonging. And second is power. We want, it's always important that you understand that you have power and that the structure of the space reinforces that. And so I don't remember if Monica was the coordinator or if it was Jennifer. I don't know who was in charge. I think it was Monica, where the students staged the sit-in. I believe was it you, Monica? Did the students sit in on you?
It was Monica and I did it.
First week, the second week.
And I remember that day so well because, in YMS, we would come to them. What do you want for lunch? Where do you think we should go? What do you think we should do? They were in charge. And we told, we want to hear your voice. And it's one thing to teach young people that they have power in the world. It's another thing to treat people like they have power where they are with you. And so one day the students let us sit in because their checks were late. And it was like weeks late. And so they sat downstairs and Monica came up and she was like, Kaleena, they're sitting in, it was like, felt personal. And I said, well, let's negotiate. Who's their leader? And we negotiated with their leader. I don't remember who it was. And we came to a conclusion and they came back upstairs and they got to work. And then we told them, don't you ever do that to us again. But we reinforced it. We allowed them to challenge us too. And we handled it in a way that we hoped would show them, that they really had a lot of power. So those are my just 2 things that I think, across all the work, even that we do outside of ALI, I think Junius Williams really planted the seed of belonging and power in all of us. So that's my 2 cents.
I think my last 2 cents would be that the fact that students felt competent disagreeing with you, mobilizing against you, means that was real education, right? It was not indoctrination, right? They were genuinely taking what you had given them and using what you had given them to solve their problems, not the stuff you had told them to say. I just think I think that's where we all want to go. I think the last thing I will do is just ask Junius, since he's played such a special role in this discussion in Newark, if you would, Junius, if you're still online, I can't see everybody right now.
I'm here.
Oh, great. Could you just say something about what was in your mind when you were creating YMS? I mean, what did you want that to go into, and what had influenced you to do that, to create that?
You're on mute, Mr. Williams.
You may be on mute.
First of all, I'm just overwhelmed with joy and with love and seeing all these people. I just typed up something. I don't think I pushed it through.
You muted yourself again.
You're muted, Junius.
I don't know what it said, but I just typed up here an expression of happiness. Legacy is setting something in motion that can't be stopped. And I didn't get a chance to push the button. It's going to come up. So thank you all for being a part of my legacy. I mean, if I had to have something to just go back and show St. Peter, I'm going to come and give him this Zoom. So
yeah, you're gonna need this Zoom when I present evidence to him. You're gonna need this Zoom to counter.
Well, you got your evidence. I got mine on YouTube. Don't forget that. My pastor here. Look at him. So, anyway, what was on my mind? Well, I go back to SNCC. I was not one of the field secretaries, certainly not a leader in SNCC, but I was a student. I got in at the last minute in the Southern movement. And I know when Bob Moses came to Mississippi, for example, he met some of the older people like Hartman Turnbow and Fannie Lou Hamer, but then there were people who were the young folks, and that's when the movement really caught on. I can't remember some of the names right now, but maybe you do, Reverend Howard. And so there was always a movement in SNCC to pass the information on, to pass the information down to the next generation, because you're not going to be able to do all of this yourself. So that all the freedom schools that I've been involved in have had that kind of a backdrop in the back of my mind. The first one was when I set up an organization called NAPA, Newark Area Planning Association, with the help of Phil Hutchins and who was a SNCC person and other folks from Newark. We fought urban renewal. I'm not going to get into all of the stuff that we did, but one of the attractions on the corner of South Orange Avenue and Bruce Street was the fact that we had a freedom school. As a matter of fact, we got young people to come in because naturally young people are curious. The folks didn't care about urban renewal because they were used to moving anyway. But when the kids started coming in, we got known as the group that helps the kids. And what were we doing? We were teaching them about who they were as young African American kids through art. We had a wonderful visual artist there named Marcia Pickett, married to Judge Pickett at this point. And that's how we did it. Then the next thing I did, something at Essex County College, which was called the Leadership Development Group. Same concept, pass the information on. But it was for more than young people. It was people my age, but also some younger ones. And then finally, the Abbott Leadership Institute, that was to get parents engaged in education advocacy. And I see a whole lot of ALI folks on here. I'm not going to call the names because I won't get everybody. But then I said one day, well, we got to make sure that young people become advocates in their own right. So it was, again, that notion that you got to teach the next generation what you know, because you're not going to be able to do it all. The parents are not going to be able to do it all. And it's easier to teach young people advocacy than it is to teach old people advocacy. Because old people got all of these things in them that constipate their minds, and young people are just open. If they can learn how to play basketball, they can learn how to be an advocate. And they take it easily. And as long as what Kaleena was saying, and Kaleena was my right-hand lady, I should say my left-hand lady working on this, because that's the right way to go, if you get what I'm saying. What we did was to make sure that young people did feel like they were in a group. And one of the things I taught in ALI, you can't, Karima, I taught this to you, you can't just be the Lone Ranger out there all by yourself trying to do the good thing, because the system will just beat you down, swallow you up, submerge you, do whatever they can. But if you get 5 people on your side, they got to listen to you. And so I think that's what YMS was all about group, bringing people together, all the things that you all have said. Yeah, and Viva, I missed those classes too. We have to keep that concept going because that's what was necessary and that's what is necessary. If you can get it in the school system, that's fine. Some aspects of this should come in the school system, but you're going to get resistance. If you get it in there, you're going to get resistance and it's going to be watered down because big institutions have to maintain themselves as they are until something from the outside changes them. So I would advocate that we continue supporting YMS. We've got the young people here who are now the second generations, the Israels and the Mahdi's and the other folks who are in charge now. These are the folks who have to be continued and supported. That's what Kaleena and Monica and me, and Monica is kind of like the bridging of the gap. She's gone off into the great world, the big world, with a nice job, and she's in a position where she can teach who outside of the visual the visual embrace of YMS, but you know, the rest of them are here doing things for young people, and I think that's what we need to do. I appreciate the time. Thank you, and I appreciate all of you.
You know, one of the first things I was exposed to when I came to Newark is Junius brought me down. I don't know if you remember this, Junius. You brought me down, I think, on a Saturday morning to meet with your ALI adults. And you know, I have to say, I've watched with curiosity how quickly we became sort of apologetic for the accusation that critical race theory was being taught in public schools. Now, we know critical race theory is about how law intersects with race, but we are talking here about some derivation of critical race theory. And Junius's point about institutions watering things down, I think we have to really digest this because, you know, I made the comment the other day about the Amistad curriculum in New Jersey schools. And of course, it hasn't been fully implemented in the way that the formulators imagined. But the indictment of the predicament of African people in America has on the education system, the economic system, the healthcare system, and so forth, makes it really too bitter to tell the truth about our sojourn in this land. So I mean, if Newark, and I love the idea, and you know this, Charles, because I said it to you, the idea that Newark would support a robust freedom school program like this warms my heart. And the Plainfield school system did this, Junius, before we took it on, before we started the Freedom School. Plainfield's Board of Education actually authorized the Freedom School and supported it financially. But of course, a new regime came in, they withdrew from the program and the thing changed. And I'm delighted that Newark would support this. But if Newark really began to adopt, embrace, and applaud the development of the kind of approach to human development that is envisioned in the Freedom School, whatever federal dollars they get may disappear in a heartbeat. You see? So, as Junius is saying, big institutions have to maintain themselves. Then you've got a lot of people who are running these things who aren't oriented toward this transformational approach. And that ought to inspire us to really deepen our commitment to this thing and have community-wide support for it, because ALI, which had tremendous impact on generations. Junius, would you say the broader community understood what ALI was and was standing on the corner with tin cups to get more money to support it? I don't think so. It's the same thing with the Freedom School, but it must be broadened. It must be on everybody's mind that what the schools can't do, these types of supplementary initiatives can do, because so many of our kids are languishing because they've not been exposed.
I would say this in terms of popularity and acceptance. I don't think that there is, while we were doing those Saturday classes, I don't think there is an education leader in the city, I'm talking about community leader, and some of the elected officials who didn't come to that class at one point or another. Now, whether I agree with what they did with the information or not is another thing. We had folks coming in there because that was the place to be. You were going to find out something new that you needed to know if you came to those classes. And fine, our average class on those Saturdays classes was anywhere from 50 to 75 people. And if we had something special, I remember when we were going to grow your own teachers. We had 150 people at that class. I'm sorry we weren't able to do that, because right now you don't have too many Black teachers coming into the school district. But we had Black and brown people coming in there to learn how can we become teachers. And it's a long story what happened to that proposal. But I just offered that to show you the popularity. So yes, people knew. Now, whether they were going to help us raise the money, therein lies the problem, because we lost some grants because we were too effective. And I won't go into that. I see Kaleena and Monica and Yolanda are nodding their heads. We know when you get too effective, sometimes the folks you thought were on your side are not there.
Monica has already mentioned the C word. I'll let it stay, but there you go. That's somehow mixed up in this thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's why we have to do better as a field when it comes to philanthropy and supporting nonprofits, because every foundation is not the same and don't have the same interests.
Well, I would say your former foundation has been one of the most reliable supporters of the effort at Bethany, and I suspect we can give testimony in other settings. So yeah, you're right. Not everyone.
At ALI too.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that was the most empowering part about working at a place like Victoria. But I think the challenge is getting those national dollars. But the thing about national dollars is that they're not long-term. National foundations often come in and out of communities, don't have the same types of relationships with the community leaders and nonprofit leaders that some of the more local foundations do, that stay committed over a period of time. And that's definitely something that should change.
And Professor, I'm going to say, and you know, maybe I'll get run out of town for saying this, but I think there ought to be a Freedom School Sunday in every church in Newark where they raise an offering to put into the pot. And I'll stop there.
I think that's a great idea. No, I think that's something we should come back to. Yolanda, I know we're beginning to push up against time, but I think we wanted to allow some time for some input from the audience. So do you want to start that now?
Yes, I've invited everyone to drop their questions in the chat. We don't see any. I don't see any right now. There was a question earlier asking about Harambe. Would someone explain that and define that? And I believe Corey did give a response, but maybe we can start there. Would the panelists like to add anything else that helps us better understand what Harambe is all about?
Let's put Corey on and let him say.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Greetings, everyone. I just have to say thank you for sharing this space. It has been just an amazing hour and a half, just really listening and remembering a lot of what Freedom School was and is, continues to be, and also YMS. Harambe, there are no words. Harambe is a Swahili word for let's pull together. So just even in the language of what it means, really resonated with all those who really were responsible for Harambe. And when the kids would come in, we would start the day with a djembe drum. And just to hear that beat and tell kids, like, you can break away from this sense of standing in a straight line with your hands at your side and being quiet and just listening to whatever your leaders have to say to you. But no, you get up, you allow your body to break free. You allow yourself to go to the rhythm of the drum. You can sing, you can dance, you can shout, you can do cartwheels, you can hold the hand of your girlfriend or your other friends and just be free for a few moments and just celebrate yourself, celebrate your culture, hear a whole bunch of affirmations about your person. And this is the way that we start our day. You know, so you leave from this sense of community, and then you go to a classroom and no one has to cheerlead you. No one has to pump you up. You feel enriched, you feel empowered, you feel free. And then the learning begins, right? So at that point, you're challenged as a teacher, as an educator, of how do I continue to match that energy they just had in Harambe in the classroom? Because we just went from a really high time. How do I maintain this height for the rest of the day? So that was really the challenge of the educator at that point, because it's like, oh, wow, like we can't go from that high time and now come to a boring classroom. How is this transferable to like what you're going to be taught and what we're going to share in throughout the day? And Harambe was something that I took from Freedom School and infused into the elementary school where I was responsible for our weekly programming. It still exists at the school that I taught at in Newark now. Harambe was a high time where kids came together for this weekly town hall meeting where they just really, really relished in this idea of like celebrating who you are and realizing who you are is not a contradiction to the academic experience that you're engaging in.
Mm-hmm.
If I could add one other thing to that, I think it's important to use the word joy, right? That as many of us understand this movement is a movement about education as joy. Education should be fun. It should be uplifting. It should be transformative, right? It is not a bunch of kids sitting at a desk doing a worksheet. And educators have been taught to be afraid of that word joy, right? To be afraid of that positive emotion. And that's a part of what Harambe is bringing together, the joyous part.
And Corey, I remember that refrain. Help me out now. I may have it wrong, but they used to say, something inside so strong.
So strong. That's right. That's right.
Powerful.
I know Kaleena wants to speak, but I'm going to just ask that everybody who can, if you have not heard Something Inside So Strong, Labe Sifre, Siffre, please Google that after this is over and listen to that. It's inspiring.
Yes.
Kaleena?
Just something that Corey said. Hey, Corey, I know that Corey. That's my voice.
Hey, what's up?
So, just something that Corey said, that the teachers would have to think, like, how can we maintain this excitement and this joy in our classrooms? And it kind of goes back to, Mr. Williams is always one to bring us back to reality. And it's always important because you got to think about that. So, how, if we were to do this in schools and in more institutional spaces where there's not just a lack of joy in education, but there's a lack of joy in the teachers who show up to teach. And there's a lack of belief. Like, you have to really believe these spaces work because people like Corey and Tanisha and myself and everybody on this call, we love these children. We think they are amazing. We believe in them. There's nothing that they could tell us, do us, show us that would change that. But the institutions that, and some of it is fair, I get it, it is very hard. But we're having a real conversation. Some of those institutions just don't believe in them the way that we do. And some of the people that are going to be in charge of implementing this don't believe the way that we do, or they've been so jaded over time that this will just be another thing. So, in the preparation of it, is it going to Tennessee? Like, how do we change the people, the adults in our institutions to embrace this? Like, how would we staff these schools? Where would we start? And maybe just some insight about how to make that happen, because it can't work without the adults being on board.
We have to have the teachers sing something inside so strong, because they don't know that about themselves. Think of that.
That's a good point.
Well, I think that's a nice segue to our next steps and call to action. I believe, Dr. Payne, you wanted to share with us some of those next steps that we can take.
Yes, I can say something about what's in place right now. And obviously, we do want some help planning a series of events this spring, like this event, that'll help inform and connect people around some of these ideas. So that's in my mind the biggest issue, right? What is also sort of in the wind is that Newark Public Schools has committed, and I think I'm saying everything correctly here, has committed to having 4 Freedom School type programs this summer, right? They're just beginning to plan what that means, but they are, in fact, a number of the folk from Teaching and Learning are on the call this morning. They're beginning to think about how they can do this and use summer school for that. Something I am just really excited about, right, is that they have asked Children's Defense Fund to figure out a way that they could train Newark teachers for the summer program, right? That would be a huge step. Children's Defense Fund training is fabulous, right? I think everybody should go through it one time. If they do that, we'll be able to have parents and community leaders take part in that training, right? So again, that discussion has just started. If we can pull that off, that would be a huge next step. But the thing that I want to emphasize is that we do want to have a kind of a working group meeting to talk about this in a smaller setting about where to go to develop the idea. And so again, I think Yolanda put my email in the chat, but it's charles.payne@rutgers.edu. Many of you see Kaleena, you can let her know if you're interested. Many of you see Sharon Smith, you can let her know if you're interested. And we'll probably pull something together for early or mid-February to push the planning process. Beyond that, all I want to say is to everyone, thank you so much for being here this morning. I want to say, obviously, a special thanks to, I've never seen Dr. Howard upstage. I want to say he was upstage today, but Monica is just special. I'm sorry. She really made my morning. I suspect she made his morning as well. Just fabulous. But a special shout out to Kaleena for being a true soldier. She does not feel well this morning. She's coughing and hacking, but she made it up here today. So that's everything for me.
Thank you, Dr. Payne, so much. And thank you to our esteemed panelists, Reverend Dr. William Howard, Monica Hall. And then we pulled in the incomparable Mr. Junius Williams, our city historian. So thank you.
So Yolanda, I don't know if Israel did this or you did this, but somebody up there put me down as Reverend Dr. William Howard. And I know Dorothy Naro was wondering, who could that be? Because in the future, if I'm ever on one of these and you fix me up, I'm Bill Howard, right? Because the guy told me on the plane once he was choking and he said, aren't you Dr. Howard? I said, yes. I said, but I'm the kind of doctor who, if you don't recover from your choke, I'm the guy you call.
Well,
Noted.
we appreciate that, but we also know that we're going to put some respect on your name and put a title
Absolutely.
on your name. So for
That's
some
right.
of us, it would
That's
always
right.
be Reverend or Dr. Howard.
No,
Just
Reverend
don't
Doctor.
ask Junius for any input, okay?
Reverend Doctor. In the Black tradition, Reverend Doctor.
Well,
right.
hey, MW, right?
Reverend Dr. M.W. Howard.
Yes,
The next
sir.
voice you will hear will be that of Reverend Doctor.
MW.
Well, I got a feeling that there's a lot of stories there that we would love to hear, but we unfortunately are out of time.
Well, but I would like to have at some point invite me to a Zoom where YMS alumni, Monica's peers, her associates, talk about what they're doing, because those of us who've been out here a while, we need to see young people doing stuff. You got
Yeah.
it? So think about
Absolutely.
that. I know you have other work, but to me, that would be a tremendous thing.
That's a great idea. We should do
Good
that.
idea.
I like
Absolutely.
that. I really
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did one earlier. We did one last year, and it was amazing. Like, one of our students works for Facebook. We have students who are social workers. They are just everywhere. And we had, I was full of tears by the end of it, but I think we should definitely do it again. So I'm going to ask Jennifer to just make sure that we get that same list out and make that happen. I think that that's a great idea, especially as we build support for bringing this model into our schools, because it needs to happen. We can't lower our expectations to the norms, of the system. We have to raise expectations. And I think the students who are products of this kind of learning are the best way to build support. So
That's
let's
Yeah.
exactly
do
right.
that.
And I think Corey is an alumnus of the Bethany Freedom School. And I just want to thank him for having that baby on his shoulder this morning. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Dr. Howard. It's funny, man, because it was like, should I put her down? And I was like, it's every reason why she should be right here.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, audience, for joining us today and staying with us a little bit after our time. We really appreciate you. Again, we give much kudos and thanks and appreciation to Dr. Payne, Reverend Dr. Bill Howard, Ms. Monica Hall, Mr. Junius Williams, and of course, Kaleena Berryman as well. Thank you for sticking with us, even though you don't feel well. We look forward to getting back with you again. Please take down some of that information in the chat and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Happy New Year, everyone. And let's continue the fight. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Feel
everybody.
better, Kaleena. Feel better, Kaleena.
Prejudice.
Thank
All right.
A song about it? Like
All
to
right.
hear? Here it go. Free your mind.
Thank you, Israel. Bye, everyone.
I wear tight clothing.
All right.
High heel shoes.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that I'm a prostitute. No. I
What
like
happened?
music. Wear hip-hop clothes.
I asked for some OT pieces. Free your mind, though. Free your mind. Everybody feel better, Kaleena. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Israel. Coming through as always. Thank you, Ms. Gregory, for being here. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Thank you, Alicia, for being here. Thank you, Elizabeth. Mary Paul. Thank you, Marcus, for being with us. Right, Israel, I'm going to sign out too.
All right.
right, see you.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you so much.
No problem. This was a
See you
good
later.
conversation.
What'd you say?
I said this was an excellent conversation.
Yeah, it was really, really, really good. And I kind of wanted to hear some of the stories between Reverend